The story begins somewhere in the Gold Coast, where we were introduced to a Canadian tourist named Greg with his pregnant friend called Heather, arriving at Tucker's experience for shark diving. After which, they meet the boat captain named Tucker, who is meant to take them around the ocean safe and sound. However, they all have a long conversation, and after a short while, Heather seems to be slightly uncomfortable, especially when Tucker asked if they came alone, but she just ignored her feelings and went along with him. On the ride across the water, Tucker narrates to Greg and Heather about his experience on how he survived a shark attack with the large bite scars on his torso. Although Heather is amazed by the fact Tucker still had the courage to drive people around the ocean, especially after his bad experience with the sharks. Anyways, they all make it to a spot in the ocean, so Greg and Heather prepare themselves for the dive. Once they were all ready, Heather seems to have a change of mind after witnessing a shark swimming around their boat. However, Tucker seems to convince her into changing her mind as they all did some breathing exercise, before then singing, which Heather seems to enjoy. Afterwards, Heather and Greg were kept inside a cage, and in bid to get deep into the underwater. Although it turns out Heather is still quite nervous, however after a little time under the ocean, she ends up finding the experience of seeing the shark swimming around the cage so beautiful. After their lovely experience, Tucker brings Greg and Heather out of the cage, and before you know it, he proceeds to stab Greg twice in the throat and push him into the water, making Heather traumatized by this. The scene shifted to a young surfer named Zephyr in a store, enjoying herself while she prepared to travel around by herself. Just then she meets a real estate agent named Moses, who asks for help with jump-starting his car. But she refused. So he blackmails Zephyr into helping him, or he will inform the store owner that she used their dumpster to throw away garbage. Since Zephyr doesn't seem to have any choice, she agreed to assist Moses, and the two drove to where his vehicle was. Once they get to the destination, she helps give the vehicle a boost. The two then begin to discuss about their love for surfing and other parts of their lives. However, after much tension between these two, Zephyr and Moses decided to take things into the next level as they both had a one-night stand. They both continue to enjoy their night together as they converse about things they both love together. Although later that same evening, when Moses goes to make Zephyr something to eat, he finds that she is already gone. Zephyr drove her vehicle to the beach, but unfortunately for her, just as she is getting her board out, Zephyr realizes she dropped her fin key at Moses' place. So she tried searching a truck to see if the owner got a spare, unknowingly to her that the truck belongs to Tucker. Suddenly, she is approached by Tucker, who knew what she was looking for. He offered to give her a spare one, which he eventually did, and once he was done, he left. However, just as Zephyr turned her back while chatting with Moses, Tucker appeared before then, putting a bag over Zephyr's head. Zephyr struggled, but to no avail as she became unconscious. Once she became unresponsive, Tucker abducts her, before then driving her to a secluded area, inside what seems to be his ship. Meanwhile, the next day, Moses goes to the spot where Zephyr parked her van and tries to join her in the water, which was in accordance to what they had planned earlier last night. So when he tries to call her phone, he hears it ringing nearby. On the other hand, Zephyr gained consciousness, only to find herself chained to a bed in a room where Heather is also being kept as a prisoner. Zephyr begins to panic while she also screamed for help. However, Heather informed her that no one can hear their cry for help. We discover that they are both in a ship in the middle of the ocean. Meanwhile, Zephyr continues to scream louder and louder while Tucker watches them from his CCTV. The next day, Tucker head out for fishing while he continued to enjoy his cool music. Zephyr tries to break her cuffs off the bed, but to no avail, so she and Heather discuss how they were both abducted. Back at the city, Moses knew something had gone wrong, but wasn't sure if he was right until he finds Zephyr's van being towed. He quickly goes to the police to ask for help in finding Zephyr. Moses believes that she has been kidnapped. Unfortunately, when they ask him about her last name, Moses doesn't know. Anyways, Zephyr continues to try to break her chains, and just as she did so, she notices that Heather has an underwire in her bikini top. Heather immediately gave it to her, and while they were both at it, Tucker comes in, so Zephyr hurriedly hides it when Tucker tries to feed them. Once he was done, Tucker left them to eat, but unfortunately, when Zephyr proceeded with her plans to escape, he returned and eventually finds the underwire, thereby ruining Zephyr's escape plan. Later that night, Heather and Zephyr gain consciousness again after Tucker has drugged them. Zephyr is strapped to a chair while Heather is tied to a harness and suspended over the water. Tucker gets his camera out and lowers Heather down into the water as sharks start circling the spot after luring them with chum. Despite Zephyr's plea, in bid for Tucker to spare Heather life, Heather is killed and devoured by the shark beneath her. Once this was over, Tucker proceeds to take a lock of Heather's hair and puts it in a collection along with other tapes from previous victims that he's done this to. Later, while Zephyr was in her cell, she began trying to break her chains. After so many tries, Zephyr came up with the idea of breaking off the handle from a waste bucket and hid it well as a weapon. So when Tucker arrived to inject her, she successfully stabbed him in the neck with it. She gets his keys and uses it to free herself from his cuffs before trying to make her way out. Just as she went close to him again, Tucker gained consciousness before then chasing after Zephyr. He catches up to her and injects her leg with a tranquilizer. Zephyr manages to throw Tucker's camera into the water, but just as she tries to swim to another boat for help, the tranquilizer knocks her out, and Tucker pulls her out of the water. Meanwhile, Moses seems to have succeeded in getting people to lead a search for Zephyr. After a short while, he got back into his vehicle, only to find security footage with Tucker's truck passing Zephyr's van from when she went missing. So he quickly make research on Tucker tourist business address and eventually found it. The next day, Tucker returns to the mainland to get a new camera and equipment since Zephyr had damaged his previous camera. Later on, Moses makes it to the boat and luckily, he heard someone yelling for help, so he quickly rushed to help out. So while he did so, he finds Zephyr's room and comes close to freeing her, but Tucker returns in time and attacks Moses. A serious battle ensues with Moses getting the beating of his life. Although he put up a fight and nearly strangled Tucker, not until Dave arrived to knock him out. Dave is in charge of getting tourists to Tucker, and he was the one who brought Greg and Heather to Tucker. However, when Dave hears Zephyr screams, Tucker slams an axe into Dave's head. Tucker immediately took his ship back into the ocean, but this time, Moses is now all chained up. He apologized for failing to rescue her and asks if anything would have happened between them. Zephyr says she is better off being alone, but Moses disagrees and says he got a good idea of who she is and how she has not had enough people care for her. Just as they were both having a conversation, Tucker arrived and takes the boat out to a different spot before then putting Moses on the harness for him to be eaten by sharks. Quickly, Zephyr instructs Moses to stay absolutely still. So Moses followed this advice. The sharks do not harm Moses. Tucker, who is now in shock, pulls him out of the water and stabs him repeatedly in the abdomen to lure the sharks back. But he has to hide Zephyr and Moses when a lifeguard chopper flies overhead. Moses, who is now seriously injured, begins to bleed profusely and in serious pains. So Zephyr tries to break her thumb to escape her cuffs. When this doesn't work, she finally bites her thumb off and hides behind the door. Once Tucker enters, she escapes before then locking him inside. She tries to call for help, but Tucker has already figured this out, so he cut the power. Zephyr manages to jump out of the boat and bid to swim to land and ask for help, but sadly, Tucker chased after her by using his speedboat. He finally catches Zephyr and drugs her, before then putting her on the harness now. He lowers her down as a shark comes near her, but even with the blood from her hand coming out, the shark seems to ignore Zephyr. She pulls herself up the harness by using a hook, but Tucker, who witnessed this, then causes her to fall back into the water, although without the harness. Zephyr swims around the boat and eventually made her way back into the ship. Tucker, on the other hand, tries to spot her, unknowingly to him that Zephyr got into the boat and she was behind him. She grabs a harpoon gun and fires it at Tucker, impaling him and pushing him into the water. Tucker tried his best to escape, but to no avail as the great white shark emerges out of the water and devours him, while his camera was still on. Sadly, Zephyr gets pulled in by the harpoon string, but she pulls herself out and spots the party boat from earlier that she tried to signal. She gets a flare and uses it, alerting the boat. After which, Zephyr goes to get Moses, who appears unconscious from his injuries. She pleads in tears for him to wake up. Suddenly, Moses wakes up and smiled. The movie then came to an end. Kindly subscribe for more if you enjoy movie recap like this. Thanks for watching and goodbye.